Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna update my name on this computer. Okay. So to get us started, I have a Google Slides presentation shared and a whole lot of information to throw at you. Since we're a small group, I'm going to do my best to run through that quickly. And if you have a question, please throw up your hand, your Zoom hand or your real hand, and we can answer it in real time. Or if I'm coming up to it next, I will just let you know. And without further ado, let me share my screen. Welcome Jill, who's joining us. Okay, great. So throw a thumbs up if you can see me. Perfect, thank you. So this evening we're talking about fiscal sponsorship, building a community of support, how artists can use this financial and administrative tool to support their own practices. And fiscal sponsorship can help artists, it can help groups of artists or collectives, as well as arts organizations expand fundraising. You wouldn't mind adding for me in the chat if you identify yourself as an artist, as a member of an organization, or perhaps somebody who is wearing multiple hats and doing both. I also have a bunch of examples from artists and projects that are working with NYFA's fiscal sponsorship program that we'll talk about. And we'll also learn how to get started if you're looking for a fiscal sponsor right now, some things to prepare for your application, more about NYFA's program, as well as look at some grant opportunities that might be a fit. And thanks for those additions in the chat. Great, many individuals today. Cool, but also a very ongoing project in scope that is like a small organization. Cool. So fiscal sponsorship is a fundraising and administrative tool, and it extends some of the benefits of a 501c3 nonprofit organization's tax-exempt status to an individual person, to a group of people, or to an organization. The practice of fiscal sponsorship, it happens across disciplines, it happens throughout the country. And if you're interested, the National Network of Fiscal Sponsors has a lot of great resources about the practice in general, not just art specific. This term of 501c3 that I just mentioned refers to a nonprofit organization that has been recognized by the IRS as tax exempt because of its charitable programs. 501c3 is literally the letters and numbers associated with that tax code, whereas referring to an organization as a nonprofit entity, something that you'll also hear this evening, means an organization that is incorporated as a nonprofit corporation for a nonprofit purpose in the world to fulfill a social mission. And that incorporation is happening at the state level. So I could incorporate my organization as a nonprofit in New York State, and I could do that without having this tax exempt status, which I would need to apply to the federal level in order to get. And fiscal sponsorship works by helping an individual artist, a group, an incorporated collective, or a nonprofit organization that has been organized at the state level get access to some of the resources of a 501c3 organization. So money or funds from a grant, from an individual donor, move from that donor through the fiscal sponsor and connecting those funds and resources back to the sponsored project. The reason why a grant maker or donor might not be able to give directly to an individual or to a group is because of the tax code and the piece that they need or incentivizes their gift is giving to a nonprofit 501c3 organization. Sometimes you'll hear fiscal sponsorship referred to as a pass-through, and yes, that's part of what we do, but really a fiscal sponsor is also providing oversight over those funds to make sure that they're being used for a charitable public benefit mission, which is why fiscal sponsors like NYFA have an application process to join the program, and oversee how you're spending those funds to make sure it's aligned with that charitable purpose. One of the reasons why an individual artist might choose to use a fiscal sponsor is to expand the amount of grant funds that they would gain access to. And just as illustrated in this graphic, there's many more opportunities and funding available for an organization that has 501c3 tax exempt status than there are to individual people, individual artists like you and I. And that's because of how our tax code works. Foundations often have a restriction in who they can give to, and that means other foundations existing as a 501c3 for a charitable purpose. There are some exceptions to this, and some of the grants we'll talk about later don't need a fiscal sponsor. That is a wonderful and beautiful thing, and I encourage you to apply. And again, sponsorship is a tool to help grant further access and help you garner more resources than you would be able to without it. Artists might use fiscal sponsorship in a number of ways for producing a project as an individual artist, working as a collective to make work together, or if you're leading an organization, carrying out educational programs in the community, running an event, a festival, a fiscal sponsor could be useful in any of those cases. This is just a snapshot from NYFA's website of our fundraising page. Projects that join our program get a profile page for fundraising, and this is a snapshot. Since we sponsor individual artists as well as groups, you're looking at both. And in line with NYFA's mission as an art service organization serving artists across disciplines, we also sponsor projects across disciplines, from film to theater, music, dance, visual arts, and other multidisciplinary projects. And there are several reasons why fiscal sponsorship can be particularly useful or supportive in the nonprofit sector. Through a nonprofit sector, things can get done that are not driven by a profit, that urge to make money, that drives the creation of businesses and ideas in the for-profit sector. And as artists working, you might occupy a unique place where you have some income generated through sales of your artwork, perhaps teaching, speaking, but also have an interest in connecting to your community in order in sharing your work with a wide audience, really working on projects that are beyond the scope of yourself and that they benefit and serve the public. In these cases, working with a fiscal sponsor to support that socially driven, mission-based work can be beneficial. So we talked a little bit about fundraising, and that sponsorship is a tool for gaining access to more resources, certainly grants, also corporate sponsorships, as well as reaching out to donors and being able to offer the benefit of a tax deduction through your fiscal sponsor, which is not something you or I can do as an individual. Working with a fiscal sponsor also can support you sometimes in the administration of those funds, whether that be through tracking payments, keeping track of donors, paying vendors on your behalf, running payroll. These sorts of administrative tools or tasks that could help you run your business and also scale that project to help it thrive. Working under the umbrella of an established 501c3 organization, like you do with a fiscal sponsor, can also help demonstrate to funders and other partners that your project has been vetted. It can make it appealing to have those supporters sign on to you because you're working with a trusted partner. And last but not least, fiscal sponsorship can be a vehicle for you to build community and build supporters for your project. That might be the audience who you already have, who's looking at your work, who is engaged with it, folks who are attending your events and want to see more, coming to exhibitions or screening, as well as anybody that you already have who might be donating to you already or possibly purchasing work. As artists, we make work over the course of our careers. And although fiscal sponsorship works on a project by project basis, working with a fiscal sponsor for those projects over time can help you weave together supporters from your project 5 years ago to what you're working on now, to carrying them forward to your future and new work. So for most folks who replied in the chat, when you're talking about applying for fiscal sponsorship and applying for all project grants and many other grants, it's really important to make a distinction between your art practice, which is the lovely full pie on the left-hand side of my screen, and your art project, the slice of pie on the right hand of my screen. The slice of pie has finite edges, more or less. It has a particular shape and size. If you were to eat it, it would have a beginning and it would have an end. And in terms of your project, this is what we would look for in a fiscal sponsorship application. And this is what I mean when I'm talking about sponsoring on a project by project basis. Your project might be creating a giant public sculpture. It could be making a documentary film. Maybe it's teaching a series of weaving workshops at an after-school program. In all of those examples, it has a start and it has a finish. Your pie will be gobbled up and enjoyed by the community. And your project will end and you'll move on to something else. In the pie that's your practice, might include things like going to studio visits, coming to workshops like this, attending museums, concerts, connecting with your community, research. All of the things that go into your practice is not something that we can sponsor. We can just sponsor the project and its related activities. And this is an example of an artist, Gusha Werfel, working through NYFA's fiscal sponsorship program. And her project is the presence and absence of the Berlin Wall. She is a photographer who applied to fiscal sponsorship to attend a residency in Berlin to do research on the Berlin Wall Trail. And she knew at the time of her application to us that she was going on a residency and she was going to have an exhibit with the photos and interviews that she completed during her research, which she did. And later her project or her slice of pie grew a little bit more and she had the opportunity to take the photos and create a book with them, which is what she's working with now. So for her, sponsorship has been a tool to apply to grants and to cultivate individual donors that she wouldn't have been able to do without us, and has been a vehicle to help her get her work into the world. For artists, for arts organizations who have a nonprofit incorporation, my pie analogy works slightly differently. And instead of the slice of pie being a discrete project, it would apply to a program that your nonprofit organization is running. And organizations like the Arts Council of Rockland County have many programs that are woven together to make the full pie. And in this case, NAIFA might work in both with the full organization or just sponsor a particular program for an arts org. And this is another example from our sponsorship program. And it is a project that has been around for over a decade. It is called Circumference, and it's a biannual journal of poetry in translation. We believe translation is a vital part of public and artistic discourse, projects that shed light on literary and artistic practice around the world. And this is an example of an organization that has chosen to incorporate at the state level. NAIFA sponsors all of their programs and activities, and their funding comes through a mix of grants, through a mix of individual donations and sales, because they also print the publication. Before we go farther, I just wanted to create some space and see if anybody has questions. And excuse me, so if you do, pop them in the chat or raise your Zoom hand. I can't quite see everybody. Yes. I can't see your name. Lisa, is that you?
Yeah, Lisa. Yeah. Does it matter who your sponsor is? I mean, do you choose your sponsor or do they choose you? You apply? Is there need to be a synchronicity between the two of you?
Great question. So, does it matter who your sponsor is? Yes, I think it does. A couple of reasons. One, as an artist, you want to make sure you're working with a reputable organization, a nonprofit that you trust, and ideally a nonprofit that has done this before and has a program structure that you can understand going into it. Excuse me just for 1 second. On the National Network of Fiscal Sponsors website, there's a great article it's like 10 questions a project should ask their fiscal sponsor. Included in that document are questions about the contract, about the intellectual property, and fees. So those are all things that you'll want to take into account. The other thought that I have about that is occasionally a grant might require that your fiscal sponsor is located in a particular geographic region. So you live in Rockland County, if you know you're applying to a grant that's located in the county in Westchester in New York State, take a look at those guidelines and take that into consideration when you're looking for a sponsor. Something to be top of mind. In terms of how getting a sponsor works, often that, yes, there is an application process. Everybody's application process and the timeline is a little bit different, and it can take some time. For example, right now at NIFA, we accept applications on a quarterly basis. So you can apply at any time, but our review happens 4 times per year. Our next deadline is March 31st. And you had one more question. Oh, um, what do sponsors look for when they're looking for a project? They're looking to make sure that your project is aligned with their mission,
Mm,
because that organization exists in the world to for a particular purpose, to do something. And so fiscal sponsorship is one of their programs, an extension of the work they're doing in the world. So they'd want to make sure, and you should too, that there is a match in terms of expertise from the organization side. They need to be able to properly oversee what you're doing. If you're applying to, I don't know, I'm not sure what your art is, but if you're applying to a physics nonprofit, they might not be able to offer you advice or feedback in the same way that an arts focused organization would. And that's risky both for you and for them.
mhm, mhm. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, Dorothy?
So I had a couple of interesting conversations with two of our members about fiscal sponsors, and they have attempted in the past to reach out to local nonprofits in Rockland County, and not necessarily arts nonprofits, but one of them's a poet, and she was applying for a grant, and she was thought that a local library was going to be her fiscal sponsor, and then after several weeks, they couldn't do it, or it might have been discussed and whatever, they decided they couldn't, and then she was kind of left without a sponsor. And then another artist was approaching, I think, nonprofits she's dealt with. They weren't arts nonprofits though, and was hoping to have them be the fiscal sponsor, and she said they really don't know how to be a fiscal sponsor. And I'm like, probably because they're not, but so I'm just curious, like in Rockland County, I don't know of any, arts organizations that, do fiscal sponsorships like routinely, like it's part of what they do, like NIFA does that. So anyway, I was just trying to figure out, just some guidance on where do artists look to find fiscal sponsors in their region, I guess.
Well, there is the fiscal sponsorship directory.org. However, that database is really organized on the state level, and it's not organized on the discipline level. Matthew, I see you have your hand up, and you'll know more about Rockland County sponsors than I do.
Yeah, I think that people have a sort of correct urge to look locally for a fiscal sponsor. And a lot of times that is a very wise thing to do. And it's really frustrating that there actually isn't a fiscal sponsor in Rockland County. Some organizations can work with Rockland Community Foundation, but it's not exactly the same thing, and it is a little bit more expensive. They have an annual fee that's like $250 or something. I'm not an expert on them. I shouldn't speak. If you're looking, you should check out Rockland Community Foundation and ask them. Since I usually work with the filmmakers, I have recommended the Jacob Burns Film Society, which is a fiscal sponsor, and it's local enough. It's a natural reaction to go to local nonprofits, like the person who went to the library, or people have come to Rivertown Film Society, which I run. This is not a strategy that I recommend, because it is, as the person that went to the library found out, the library realized that they were getting in over their heads, and that there is a lot of work involved on their end for, especially for certain kinds of grant applications, such as New York State Council of the Arts. Your organization, the library, has to be registered with the state, and it's a total hassle. And those state administrative things, they're not easy, they're not intuitive, and they're not geared toward artists at all. So it's just not a pleasant experience. And for small organizations, and there's a lot of small organizations in Rockland County, it's actually, it can be a problem for their own budgets. If they have a budget of $50,000 and they take on a project that's 10,000, all of a sudden their budget looks bigger than their organization actually is. If you're a $500,000 organization, sure, then a $5,000 or $10,000 artist project is not going to make a big difference. But if you're a really small organization, and there's a lot of those in Rockland County, all of a sudden your budget doesn't reflect what you actually do. So that can be a little difficult too. So it is frustrating. I mean, arts service organizations such as the Arts Council of Rockland often are fiscal sponsors. I've thought about this a lot in terms of Rockland County. It's labor intensive. I don't think that the Arts Council of Rockland is, that's necessarily a good fit. It would be a great service to have, but when you have an organization that has its hands full and only has an employee and a half or something, it's a big responsibility to take on. So Rockland County is a fiscal sponsorship desert.
Yep. I just want to weigh in, or Matthew, thank you for all of that. I've only lived in Rockland County for a year and a half, but I am running a project at a public nature preserve. And I first approached the nonprofit, the Friends of the Nature Preserve, and they took a list at what was going to be entailed in them being a fiscal sponsor for me for a grant. And they backed away and said, no way, we don't have the capacity for that kind of accounting, just sort of to even handle all of that paperwork, like you said, an employee or an employee and a half. And I am right now working with a non-arts nonprofit. It's a Prairie Foundation to put on a project. And again, it's a lot more paperwork to get this grant administered and everything done properly. And I'm finding myself feeling very badly sort of about it, that it's a lot more work for these, two women who kind of do everything there. So this is like very eye-opening. I have to admit, I didn't even really understand what NIFA fiscal sponsorship was. And it's very eye-opening to think that there's an entity out there that would handle, that does the accounting, and that maybe, I guess this is a question, like if I was NIFA sponsored, does that mean, grant money would come in and then I don't have to pay out the musicians? Does that mean that NIFA is cutting checks to musicians? It doesn't go through me anymore at all? Or how does that work?
Before Madeleine answers that, because that's sort of integral to fiscal sponsorship, and especially NIFA fiscal sponsorship. But I also want to point out that when you're going to an organization and applying for a grant, and the grant goes to that organization before it goes to you, and that organization is taking on a lot of these, they have to keep that money set aside. That's not their money, it's your money. And it becomes it's like a separate bank account, and not really, but realistically, it's set aside from their operating funds. It has to always be there for you. They can't spend it on their overhead and think, oh, we'll pay it back next month. That's not the way it's supposed to work. And fairly, it's not often, but regularly, organizations get in trouble when they start running out of money, and yet on the books, they have fiscally sponsored projects that they owe money to, and now they don't have money. It's a horrible situation when it happens, but it's not, it has happened. It does happen. Madeleine, I think you should answer the real question.
So in NYFA's program, you have the option of paying your vendors directly, like by paying them out of pocket and then reimbursing yourself through NYFA. You also have the option of having us pay your vendors directly. We don't use checks. We pay via an ACH direct deposit. So it goes from NYFA's bank account to their bank account. And the option of to do it via reimbursement or to do a direct payment is up to you. I will add that every fiscal sponsor might work on payments a little bit differently. Like it's also possible that funds could go from a grant or from a donor to the fiscal sponsor. The fiscal sponsor would issue you the funds, and then you would be responsible for dispersing them to your vendors, keeping track of the records, and then reporting back to the sponsor how the funds were used. That is a perfectly legitimate practice and something that happens. And then I guess if you're you are either looking for a fiscal sponsor, and I'll try to find the article and add it to the chat. You should really look at this 10 questions to ask a potential sponsor, because in talking, it brings up some of the concerns that Matthew was raising about what happens when an organization with good intentions is not operating their sponsorship program as it should be. And so, certainly as the artist, as the maker, you want to prevent that before it happens, if at all possible. And I think it's easier to happen at a small organization and easier to happen at an organization that doesn't have the appropriate infrastructure to create boundaries. I'm going to circle back to nonprofit fundraising strategies. I'm going to give this 10 more minutes and then take a little bit of questions. So on my screen, you'll see a lovely desert and mountainous background. And I like this picture because I think it's a really useful metaphor for thinking about what a diverse stream of income looks like for a project. And when you are creating a budget that you might use to design your project, to submit a grant application to share with a partner, to put on your fiscal sponsorship application, can be helpful to think about that in broad terms. And when you're working with a fiscal sponsor, anything in this contributed income yellow box are donations or funds that could be received by your sponsor. And then down at the bottom, the earned income are funds that would go directly to you as an artist, because they're not donations. They're fees for services, for selling merchandise, that sort of thing. And even though it's earned income, it's still an important part of your budget. And it's still important to show both halves of that when you're thinking about how to fundraise. Occasionally a question that we receive is, oh, I'm working on a nonprofit project, so I can't sell a class, I can't sell my paintings, that would be a for-profit activity. And so long as that work is related to your project, and so long as the proceeds of it are put back into the project, you can certainly include that in your income. And merchandise, tickets to an event, or artwork are all examples of earned income. not every project might use each of these different strategies. I think it's important to remember that they change over time, that you might use grants and individual giving for one project and rely more heavily, say, on crowdfunding and corporate sponsors and special events for a project that you do down the road, or what you start out planning might not work, and you might hope for grants and individual giving and need to add a crowdfunding campaign down the road. The point is to understand what the landscape looks like and be open and prepared to change that as needed in order to fundraise for your project. And thinking about how to incorporate or use these fundraising strategies at tools at different points in your project can be helpful for you as an artist, right? Fundraising is kind of like a creative practice, not unlike working in the studio or putting together a concert. So you have to figure out how the different pieces are going to work together to get you the greater end. If you've either been to or have an idea for hosting a really great fundraising event, or you've been the recipient of an amazing crowdfunding perk, something like that, I'd love to hear about it in the chat. Full disclosure, I'm going to a Jello themed fundraiser on Saturday. People are submitting Jello sculptures as part of the event, and we will look at them and also eat Jello. So it can be fun, it can be creative, and the point is to get people together in a room and excited about giving if it's a special event. You know, a crowdfunding campaign is like an online party, or you want to pique people's interest and keep them engaged. I included a few grant opportunities that I'm not going to dive deeply into, but wanted to shout out because I've mentioned New York State Council on the Arts a few times. All of you, as residents and taxpayers in New York State, are potential candidates for the Support for Artists grant, which is a grant specifically designed to support the creation of new works of art. It's designed to pay you for making art. A fiscal sponsor is required to apply to the State Arts Council, and these applications usually come out in May. So now is a great time to be gathering your resources and finding a fiscal sponsor to plan ahead for that future grant timeline. And as Matthew mentioned, it's an icky state website. There's some administrative work for your sponsoring organization. So the sooner you can find that partnership, the better. And if you really want to apply, but your work is not ready or your project isn't quite formalized, these are annual grants. So you can also keep in mind to apply next year with a stronger application if that suits you. Puffin Foundation, amazing first-time funder. They have a biannual rotating disciplines. Their upcoming cycle is for 2025 is in film, video, and theater. But there is an environmental activism category that was granted to this year and will be back in 2026 that your, Jody, your concert in the nature preserve could be an interesting fit for. Puffin really likes to be a first-time funder. The grants are small, $2,500 or less. But they're also a private family foundation. They're pretty nimble in what they fund and that they'll change the grant categories over time. And they're really working to reach a broad range of disciplines through the structure of their application. The other footnote on that is they actually require you to submit a self-addressed stamped envelope to get access to the application. So you do need to snail mail them and plan on doing that. Usually their website is updated by October and then due by December 31st. It's like their own weeding out process to go back to paper. And then again, Arts Westchester, Arts Alive. These applications are open and due in a month, I think March 14th. Okay, Dorothy's nodding around then. And it is a great opportunity for you to apply. There is an individual artist commission. And the individual artist commission does not require a fiscal sponsor. Puffin Foundation does not require a fiscal sponsor. You could apply directly. NISCA does need one, and it looks like the other two categories for Arts Alive require a sponsor. For our purposes, through NYFA fiscal sponsorship, if you apply for a grant that does not require a sponsor, we still want to see it on your budget. And we don't need to oversee that grant. It can go directly to you. And that is great because that money is going to support your project and to support your work. I have a couple examples of artists' work. Folks who have used the program working across disciplines. This was an interactive video installation about climate change, funded primarily through NISCA, State Arts Council, and he projected images on buildings. Mercedes Sear, also another NISCA applicant. She's working in autobiographical dance performance. Emily Rubin is a writer and literary artist who has received 2 NISCA grants over a 3 or 4 year cycle. You can check out her website to read an excerpt of Hold On, which was a State Arts Council funded project. In this example, Stotanema, Ida Sehovic started in our program creating this participatory public monument to the 1995 Srebrenik genocide, in which thousands of men and boys were executed. It was a participatory public monument happening annually where people gathered and created the monument using small porcelain coffee cups and pouring coffee into them. The tragedy from this event also had a strong community sense of participation, both from people from her community as well as the public and passersby who became involved. She used Facebook fundraising and community giving to a great extent, and later decided to shift the project to become a nonprofit organization. It was her own 501c3. She left the program and also makes sculptures in addition to running that organization. Swale, Mary Mattingly. This is a barge that floats around New York City waterways. And the idea started as a way to create green space where people could pick like food off of plants, which is technically illegal within New York City. And so to circumvent that law, Swale was born. And they have an incredible public benefit, hosting visitors, giving tours, school field trips, summer programs through youth employees. And they received an initial seed grant through Blade of Grass, but have also been supported through individual contributions through the New York State Council on the Arts. Corporate sponsors like Whole Foods have supported this project, as have many in-kind contributions. So giving like objects giving plants rather than giving financial resources in order to help the project flourish. In CU was a 2-year running dance festival that happened in Long Island City, all outdoors, rain or shine. And Svea Schneider, the project director, really dug in deeply to her community and to find local businesses who wanted to support. You can see a glimpse of their website where everybody's logo was featured prominently. She also had flyers and brochures and tent setups of sponsors who had something to share or wanted to interact with the community, also gained access to her audience. And this is Interlude Artist Residency, an organization whose purpose is to support visual artists who are also parents. And although this organization is their own 501c3, they're so tiny, very small, and they work with NYFA just for the oversight of a private grant that they've received that requires an organization with a larger budget to oversee it. So in this case, they're working sort of similarly to an artist project, and that we're only overseeing that tiny piece of their work. If at this point you are thinking, I am either really tired of fiscal sponsorship or completely ready for fiscal sponsorship, you might consider it if you are planning a large-scale public benefit project. If the project is nonprofit in nature, is it existing for a nonprofit purpose, something outside of and beyond the success of the maker? And it benefits other people. That could be by screening an amazing film, hosting a concert in the woods, something that people can attend or be awed by, like a giant cross-stitch banner that you stumble upon. Fundraising takes a bit of time, so while not a hard and fast requirement, if the project is happening in the future, like next year, 2 years from now, you can have the time to dive into fiscal sponsorship, get your application in, get yourself approved, and have some time to do grant research if that's the way you want to go, and start working on applications. I like to call this out because often a grant might have 1 cycle or maybe 2 cycles per year, but since it takes time to apply, it takes time for the funder to figure out the results and you to even get the money. A kind of long vision is important. It's important for individual donors too, right? Because asking for funds is all about cultivating relationships, and that takes time and care and work, and it is an ongoing process that you're probably already doing, whether or not you know it, and is going to be something that you can continue to grow and build upon from project to project. NYFA's fiscal sponsorship application is similar to a grant application in that we ask for a narrative, we ask for a budget, as well as work samples. It's great to see something that you've done in the past, as well as something, it could be a sketch, just an idea, to help us understand what you want to do in the future. In order to write about your project, it's really important for you to understand the who, what, why, when, where, how of it. And you're going to want to be able to describe that in writing, as well as describe it in numbers in the budget that you'll upload to your application. If the project is more than just you, if you're working in collaboration, you'll also want to share information about your team or any partners who are helping you. And fundraising experience is absolutely not required to join, but what is required is a vision of how you plan to fundraise. That might be thinking again back to the landscape, noting what grants you want to apply for, understanding why those grants are a good fit for your project and your project's timeline, thinking about crowdfunding, if that's something you'd like to do, special events, individual donors, and then being able to tell us why that's your plan and why you think it'll work. And some more nuts and bolts about our program. Our next application deadline is March 31st, and that information is available on NYFA's website. There's no fee to apply, but you do need a minimum budget of $15,000. So that's the large of the large scale public benefit project. And that budget should include fees to pay yourself for your work, as well as to make sure that everybody who is working on your team is also being paid. And then we charge an administrative fee for this work starting at 8%. And there is a $100 registration fee to join the program. Some of the perks and support that we offer is a monthly newsletter with upcoming deadlines, one-on-one strategy sessions with NYFA staff. That includes Matthew, as well as myself. We host a monthly community conversation series, as well as additional workshops. Funders can donate online via NYFA's website and our project directory, and artists can also track contributions through our online portal. And NYFA, as an arts service organization, offers a wide range of other professional development programs and resources that you can take advantage of. And I mentioned some of this, but a couple of reminders. You do need a social security number or to be incorporated as an LLC or corporations and have an EIN. You cannot be in school. And we're in Rockland County, so I don't think any of you are doing an international project right now, but if you were or are thinking of it, that you can do an international project, but there needs to be still that clear public benefit to US taxpayers. And we're at 8:02, and I'm gonna share with Dorothy a copy of this presentation so you have it, but we have some events coming up later this month, which you can find on NYFA's website, including Artists in the Challenge of Using Copyrighted Material, Fair Use to the Rescue, courtesy of Matthew, who planned this event. And we do also have a medical emergency grant also coming up. So I'm happy to stay on and answer some questions if anybody has them. I'm gonna
Yeah, I have a question.
got my share. Yep.
I noticed that there's a lot of grants that come up for New York City artists, and I live in Rockland County. But sometimes I am, well, in particular, I'm going to be doing a project in the city in June of 2025. By having somebody like NYFA as a fiscal sponsor, does that open up being able to apply to some grants that are only going to be given to a New York City entity, and then the money is going to be paid to New York City resident artists?
Well, depends on the grant, but typically working with a fiscal sponsor that's located within the 5 boroughs is not sufficient to issue funds to an artist who is living outside of the 5 boroughs when those grant guidelines have a residency stipulation. It really just depends upon the funder. I think if you are interested in applying to a New York City-based institution, like you have something coming up, that it would be great to talk about them, to see what funding opportunities they are applying to, and to figure out if they could apply as an organization and then allocate a portion of that project budget to fund your work.
Mhm. Mhm.
Something like NISCA, you can apply to for your work as an individual artist, as long as you're within the state. But a New York City institution could say apply for funding through the city itself, through the Department of Cultural Affairs. They can apply for discretionary funding through City Council. And the way for you to get access to those funds would be for them to budget for your project as part of them and then pay you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm curious, how many people have fundraised for something before? Couple of hands? No? Some, a little bit? Okay. Did you like it? Was it fun?
I had fun with crowdfunding. That was my favorite. I really dread writing grants, so it's not my happy place. But the crowdfunding was successful, and fun and very interactive with the people. I really enjoyed it.
Cool. And do you have like your list of supporters from that experience?
I mean, like, did they share their emails with me? Yeah, I think I have all that. Sure. Yeah.
Great.
I will say the one thing that was easier with crowdfunding was it was this project that I was making a product. And so that was easier than, let's say, making a project because I had something to give to the people who were were doing the funding.
What was your product?
It was an oracle deck, a tarot oracle deck.
Oh, cool.
And it was with photographs.
Highly recommend it. Highly recommend it.
Thank you all. Thank you all. So everybody got something at the end. They knew they were getting, and they got it at a lower price. So I don't know. I think it's easier when you have something to give them at the end.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It also makes me think of sometimes for filmmakers who will do a crowdfunding campaign, and a donor might not be getting a physical copy of the film, but they are getting sometimes intangible benefits like an executive producer credit, or occasionally tickets to a screening or to an opening event. What about grants? How are folks applying to grants? Yes. Lisa, I see you nodding, even though you said you don't like writing them.
Yeah. Yes, I hate writing them, but I do. But I have never done. I haven't done this, with the fiscal sponsor. I've only done it as an individual, and there aren't that many grants to apply to. And a lot of people apply for them. So I have gotten grants from ACOR, not from ACOR, from Westchester, the Art to Live grant. I've done a couple of those. And Jody, actually, one of them was, I did get that for a project that was at Riverhook, which but I think you're talking about.
The magical banners.
Oh, yeah, yeah, okay, the women, yeah.
I miss them every time I walk by that grove of trees. I miss your women.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Has anyone ever worked with a fiscal sponsor?
Yeah, I have. Mhm.
And how'd that go?
Um, good, good. Both the first time, it was the first time I ever ran a community arts project. I ran a concert series back when I lived in Brooklyn, and the Flatbush Development Corporation, which is like kind of the nonprofit entity that is an economic engine for a lot happening in that neighborhood. They were my nonprofit sponsor. And I was sort of like right out of grad school and very green. And their accountant like whipped me. She like got me into shape and like, no, this is how you do accounting. This is not good enough. Come back again tomorrow. And she like, yeah, she taught me what to do. It was good. It was a very good experience. Yeah. So that was my first time working with a fiscal sponsor. So my I guess it was my my NISCA funds went through
Mhm.
Flatbush Development Corporation, and also my Brooklyn Arts Council funds went through them. All of it did. And now I'm working with a nonprofit in another state to do a project elsewhere. It's the Prairie Foundation I spoke of, and the women are amazing. I just um, realize it's a lot more for them to shoulder than maybe either any of us realized. But they're really wonderful supporters, and they're doing it. They're doing it all. So
And fiscal sponsors become part of your network, and they've done it hundreds of times, thousands of times. They've seen what works, what doesn't work. They know what, you know, the questions really mean, and they can really be helpful. I mean, yeah, they charge a percentage, but it can be, they can be really useful. Not all fiscal sponsors provide that kind of help, but many do, and that's a great thing to take advantage of for the right kinds of projects. And I wanted to say about crowdfunding and Lisa's experience, which was, I don't, you know, I don't be apologetic about having something to give people, as though like that's somehow commercial. When the church funded artists, everybody made religious art. When the royal families funded artists, everybody made pictures of the royal families. When your audience funds your work, you got to give them something too. You know, there could very well be a change in the art that we make as a result of the fact that our audience is paying for it. So it's just a natural evolution of art, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's a fantastic tool, really, the whole idea. I wanted to mention the idea of a public benefit, and that makes people feel like, well, it has to be somehow educational or promote social change. But, you know, a landscape painting can change lives. A poem can change lives. What public benefit is, it can't happen. You can't change that life if it's not shown. So you have to have a plan for getting your work shown. You won't be able to raise money to create artwork that sits in your room, in your house. So you need to have a good and a realistic plan for getting your work shown. And there's plenty of unrealistic plans out there. So, be realistic. And also, it's yours afterwards. It's, these are nonprofit projects, but when you're done and you're out of fiscal sponsorship, it belongs to you and you can make money off of it. It's no longer a nonprofit.
Lisa, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say two things. One, Matthew, did I sound apologetic about having a product?
I thought maybe there was a tinge of like, this was not a typical art project, and therefore wasn't, there was.
I'm not apologetic about it. But maybe I think it's easier when you have something to give because it's like a merchandise. I'm saying it because I thought it was easier to have something. But, even if you're making music, you could have a CD, that you're giving. They want to know they're getting something,
Yeah,
I think,
absolutely. It was easier to make pictures of religious themes when the church was giving you money. I mean, it's just a logical thing that people who give you money want something that they can share. So,
yeah. But
and plus those decks were really beautiful.
I have one specific question. If you have one thing I ran into was when I produce these big banners, I'm paying a printer to print them, and then they charge tax. If you have a fiscal sponsor, then does it make you a non-profit, or do you pay for it so you're not having to pay the tax?
So in regards to sales tax,
Yeah.
through NYFA's fiscal sponsorship program, if NYFA is paying your vendor directly, then for large purposes, like a lot of printing, yes, you could use NYFA's New York State sales tax exemption. There's a couple, it's a little tricky because it requires the vendor to accept our sales tax exemption. Not everybody does, not everybody wants to do that. They would need to provide you with an invoice up front. You would submit that to NYFA and we would pay them. And we do require that you have the full balance of that invoice plus the tax in your account just in case at the time we issue it. And then NYFA takes care of sending the exemption form to your vendor so you can get that. Also, caveat, not every fiscal sponsor works this way. So it's not like sign up for fiscal sponsorship, get a sales tax exemption. It's really nuanced and based upon the sponsor's decision. And then, as I said, even within NYFA's program, there are some limitations to how it works.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Jody, you mentioned that you were working on an out-of-state project. Is the Prairie Foundation that's helping you located in the state where the project is happening?
Yes. Yeah, that's in Missouri, in my hometown of St. Louis. Yeah, the Missouri Prairie Foundation. Mhm. So that definitely helped secure the grant funding there locally. Mhm.
That's great. That's also, it's also just interesting. Did the funder require that you have a local fiscal sponsor?
Yes. And I think actually it is really great to work with a fiscal sponsor because, I mean, there are all of these added benefits from their network of people. I mean, they're doing marketing and publicity to their huge network of, 15,000 people on their mailing list for these performance events. So there's just a lot of benefits that go on besides just the fiscal sponsorship. It's sort of their whole network of people too. Yeah,
How
it's
did
real
you find them to participate?
They heard me on St. Louis NPR. They heard me on public radio and sent an email and said, "We want to partner with you."
That sounds magical.
Yes. Mhm.
And you've been in Rockland County for a year and a half. How about other folks? Did you used to live in the city and also move to Rockland County? Or are you from Rockland County? Yes, nodding. And you're all going to apply to Arts Alive? Some nods, a handful of nods. Well, in addition to Art Alive, I hope you keep your eye on the Puffin Foundation, because it's an awesome opportunity, and particularly for those of you who haven't applied for a grant or who don't like writing, it's worth your time and effort to get to know this particular foundation. And applying for a grant, whether or not you get it, it's like saying hello to somebody. It's the first step in forging a relationship. And if your first application doesn't work out, it's completely normal and expected to reapply to them and to continue the process and relationship building. And if you are looking for a fiscal sponsor, I hope you will reach out to Matthew and I at NYFA. I'm gonna pop my email in the chat. You can reach us there. And then I'm also happy to share a copy of my presentation with Dorothy. You could share it out. So the links will be live.
Yep.
Cool. And I'm also popping into the chat, and I'll include it with my presentation, but that article that I mentioned from the National Network of Fiscal Sponsors site, 10 questions potential projects should ask a fiscal sponsor. For those of you who are thinking of working with a sponsor now or maybe in the future, or are just curious, it's a really great resource to help get you thinking about it and asking questions and considering how this type of relationship might benefit you and your art project.